Today, the Department of Justice is suing to block a merger between two of the biggest insurance brokers in the world. The companies, though, are fighting back. The jobs recovery stalls with a sudden increase in jobless claims. Should we be concerned? And Apple, along with other big tech companies, are competing for their spot in the healthcare industry. Apple wants to hire doctors and create its own medical service. What would patients say? That and much more coming up in NTD Business. Good evening. Great to have you with us. Texas is a little upset with Elon Musk. It says his rockets are taking up too much space on public beaches for too long. So now the state's DA is asking Musk to give Texans more space. SpaceX is using stretches of undeveloped land near Boca Chica Beach to build and test massive rocket prototypes. Apparently, the company is allowed to use the beaches for up to 300 hours per year, but the DA says it's already helped itself to 400 hours. Texas says the company is also using unlicensed security guards to ward people off public roads. That could violate state laws. Impersonating an officer could amount to a third-degree felony. It's not clear if SpaceX has responded to the warnings yet. And the Department of Justice is trying to stop two of the world's three biggest insurance brokers from merging. It says the deal would limit competition and lead to even higher prices for consumers. Anthony's Olin Richards has the details.
The U.S. Department of Justice is suing insurance brokerage giants Aon and Willis Towers Watson, saying their plans to merge would combine two of the three largest insurance brokers in the world. They're concerned it will eliminate substantial head-to-head competition and lead to higher prices and less innovation, harming consumers.
It doesn't appear to me to be a open and shut case. It is very complicated because of the various different businesses involved in both of these large firms.
Aon and Willis are insurance brokers, which means that they are intermediaries between their clients and the insurance companies. They help clients find the best policies.
So then the question is, will the merger actually increase their ability to negotiate better pricing with the insurance carriers on their behalf, or will it harm it?
Not helping Aon's case, the DOJ alleges one executive said, "We operate in an oligopoly, a market dominated by a small number of companies." One insurance executive says that's enough concern for the DOJ to investigate.
Are they then going to be motivated in the same way to make those things happen, or are they going to be more motivated to have the synergies sort of pay back to shareholders?
The two firms disagree with the DOJ, accusing it of a lack of understanding of their business. They claim the merger will accelerate innovation and create more choice. Arlene Richards, NTD News.
And Ford is betting even bigger in electric vehicles. It looks set to buy California startup Electrify. Electrify helps manage charging for large vehicle fleets. This platform helps track the real-time status of electric vehicles, chargers, and maintenance services. Ford is aiming to electrify 40% of its vehicles by 2030. Electrify could help Ford with one of its key customer groups, commercial fleet operators, since it takes a lot more planning to charge an electric car than to fill a fuel tank. Electrify's charging management platform will be part of Ford Pro, a new unit focusing on commercial and government customers. The deal is expected to close this month. And how would you like your doctor to be employed by Apple? A new report suggests the tech giant is going to link data from its personal devices with a new health platform that would give you access to real doctors you could speak with through your phone. NTD's Evelyn Lee has the details.
Tech giants are trying to branch out further, this time into the healthcare industry. On Wednesday, the Wall Street Journal revealed Apple's extensive plans. The company wants to create its own medical service with Apple-employed doctors. Dr. Ken Perry says it makes sense, with all the people now getting used to healthcare at home.
They own so much of the time and space of people's home environments. They're going to see how they can take that and affect healthcare.
According to the report, Apple's thinking about linking data from its devices with virtual and in-person care. Perry says it could shorten the process and the waiting time before a patient can be diagnosed.
Rather than just you coming to the hospital and me having to admit you and put you on a monitor for 2 or 3 days, now I'm going to have some of that information before you even arrive.
Just earlier this year, Amazon launched Amazon Care. And just like its other services, speed is at the heart of it. Amazon realizes that the hospital process is inefficient, and it wants to change just that.
It's very likely for patients to be in the ER for 2 or 3 hours, which in comparison to years before is extremely quick. But what patients want is even faster than that. They want answers the moment they arrive.
Microsoft has also stepped into telehealth, offering a cloud for healthcare professionals to schedule and conduct virtual patient visits. Since healthcare is a very expensive sector, Perry says it's a great opportunity for tech companies to maximize profits.
So if these big tech companies are able to figure out how to own a vertical component in that space, then really be able to be part of not just the diagnostics, but also the delivery of healthcare, they're probably going to be able to do a really good job in minimizing costs.
He says he expects this to be a big push that patients will be willing to spend money on. According to a report by Business Insider, tech companies might encounter difficulties at first. That's especially in gaining consumers' trust, but also because of concerns about cybersecurity. Evelyn Lee, NTD News.
And Google just opened its first ever retail store today in Manhattan. Now you can try out Google hardware and services firsthand. NTD's Arian Pastor takes us there to see what it's like.
Most people are using some sort of Google software every single day. Google Maps, Gmail, or just a search engine, Google. But the tech giant also makes hardware devices, and now its first ever physical store opened its doors here in Manhattan on Thursday.
Now Google has a store. They're just going to be popping everywhere. Apple better, pick up the game.
It's really unique to be able to have like the interactive areas.
The store features a number of interactive experiences. They demonstrate Google's hardware and services in a more hands-on experience.
They want you to have experience like you're at home, and they want you to feel comfortable.
For example, the so-called sandboxes, which are similar to living rooms in furniture stores. In one of them, you can see what it feels like using smart home devices.
It is a little jarring. It's like, wow, like everything is like speaks to you, It's like, what do I talk to? What do I listen to?
In the Pixel Sandbox, you can check out camera features within a custom light installation. And in the Stadia Sandbox, you can play games. And there's the Google Imagination Space. It can feature different technologies. Right now, it's a big embodiment of a Google Translator.
It was really neat to be able to see kind of what I said and then it being able to be translated so quickly in over 100 languages.
Besides the entertaining aspect, the store also serves a functional use, of course. Customers can bring in their broken Google products, many of which will be repaired on site. Arian Pastar, NTD News, New York.
And pet food company Chewy says supply chain issues costed $40 million in sales in the last quarter. That's according to its CEO in a recent sales call. Chewy has been seeing big growth sales lately, but inventories were down 5% from the start of the year, according to financial filings. The CEO says it's because of supply chain issues. He also says the constraints are mostly for canned pet food. He did say they expect the situation to get better in the second half of the year as production capacity increases. There's a fireworks shortage too, just in time for the 4th of July. So if you're planning to get them, you better stock up. One retailer is warning that a supply shortage that began last year could impact Americans for the second year in a row. Fireworks sales exploded in 2020 after many professional displays were canceled. But the nation's largest consumer-based fireworks company, Phantom Fireworks, is advising those who want to celebrate at home to buy now. The company says shortages are due to shipment challenges in the global market, most of them coming from China. Shortages are partly because of a record volumes of imported goods are flowing into the United States. One of the leading ports of entry, the Port of Los Angeles, is operating at an unprecedented level, setting 2 records in the past week.
According to the latest statistics released on June 15th, the Port of Los Angeles processed over 1 million cargo containers in May. This is a jump of 74% compared to last year. It was the busiest month ever in the port's 114-year history, and a first for any port in the Western Hemisphere.
This is not only the busiest and largest, but this twin port complex together with our sister port of Long Beach. 31% of the goods brought into this country, 1 out of every 48 jobs in America, 1 out of every 9 jobs in the region comes through this port.
Last week, the Port of Los Angeles set another Western Hemisphere record of processing more than 10 million containers in a 12-month period. With a new round of $1,400 stimulus checks pouring into the U.S. economy, consumer spending is up, but the imbalance of imports with the rest of the world continues to raise the record-level trade deficit.
Our trade gap has widened now to 4.9 to 1. That's the widest import to export gap that we have seen in our time.
The port's top imports are furniture, automobile parts, apparel, footwear, and electronics. In exchange, waste paper, pet and animal feed, scrap metal, and soybeans are loaded here in large vessels destined for Asia. One major customer of the port is the biggest U.S. agricultural product exporter, the DeLong Company. For more than 15 years, the company has been exporting soybeans to countries like China, Japan, Vietnam, South Korea, and Taiwan. The recent uptick in coronavirus cases in the region could have an impact on U.S. trade.
We're watching very closely with the outbreak of COVID-19 in Yantian, where South China ports around the Pearl River Delta are operating right now at about 50% of capacity. 1/3 of all our vessel sailings on the inbound side emanate from South China, so this is an important market for us to continue to watch.
Meanwhile, the majority of the containers are shipped back to Asia empty as soon as they are unloaded at the LA port.
And stocks ended mostly lower on Wall Street today. The Dow fell 210 points, 0.6%. SP 500 lost 2 points. The Nasdaq added 122 points, about 0.9% today. But a blip in the employment rebound last week. Jobless claims rose when they were expected to fall. Fewer people have been signing on each week since the beginning of May. That's a positive. But last week, it went up 37,000 to 412,000. 360,000 was economists' prediction. Self-employed and gig worker claims also went up almost 120,000. The number of people receiving benefits of all different kinds, think special pandemic benefits too, it did decline, falling more than 500,000. Louisiana is the latest state to end enhanced unemployment benefits and one of the first blue states to do it. A handful of Republican-led states terminated some or all of the federal government's assistance, with 21 others set to do so by the middle of July. Louisiana's Democrat governor is ending the $300 federal jobless boost early too. Employers apparently having a hard time filling a record 9.3 million job openings. Some say the extra benefits are discouraging people from going back to work. Lack of childcare, early retirements, and health concerns are also possible reasons why some Americans aren't rushing to go back. Louisiana will drop out of the program on July 31st. For the rest of the country, that extra help ends early September. So the jobs recovery stalled a little last week. Is it a big deal? I asked Professor Michael Busler at Stockton University.
With regard to the new jobless claims, that number is always rough and it's very bumpy. Most economists will say if the number is under 300,000 a week, the economy is doing pretty well. So we're not that far from it. Even prior to the pandemic hitting, that number was running about 210, 220, 230,000 a week. So even when the economy is doing exceptionally well, there are some businesses that just simply don't do as well.
What are your thoughts on the labor shortage we're seeing at the moment? Have you ever seen anything like it before, and do you have any solution?
No, not when there are this many people unemployed. So the question is, why aren't these people coming back to work? Of the 22 million that lost their job from the shutdown, about 7.5 million are still unemployed, yet there are over 9 million job openings. So why aren't they going back to work? Well, a few reasons. One that most people give is it financially doesn't benefit them to go back to work. Why? They're unemployed, they're collecting unemployment compensation. The federal government added $300 a week to that. So now they're making as much or almost as much not working, and they say to themselves, why should I go work for 40 hours for an extra $80 or $90 a week? I'd rather stay home, collect what I'm collecting. They also say that what's keeping people out of work is they have a fear of catching the virus. That's keeping people back. and there's not enough because some schools had been closed and kids are home and there's not enough daycare available, that one of the parents has to stay home to take care of the kids.
We see some businesses attempting to solve it through automation. There are some restaurants there in New Jersey who are hiring little robots to serve the food. What impact is this trend towards automation going to have on the economy long term?
So the higher the wages, when you push the minimum wage up to $15 an hour, and when people don't go back to work and you have to pay $16, $17, $18 an hour to get them back, businesses start to say, look, I have servers and people that take your orders, but when the cost of labor is greater than the cost of capital, it pays them to look for replacements in capital. I go into McDonald's now, I don't order from a person, there's a big touch screen there. I order from the touch screen, you're getting paid through your credit card at the touch screen. The problem with the higher wages is the higher the wages go, the more incentive there is for business to switch from labor intensive to capital intensive, and that could have some long-term implications.
Is it going, obviously, from an efficiency standpoint, it might work, but from an overall societal perspective, is it going to hurt? What are we going to have to pay these people like UBI or some of these benefits to not work?
Well, the way to avoid this, the president's position would probably be, well, these people their jobs are being replaced by machines. We're going to have to compensate them for that. The real answer to this is you're looking at it, with all due respect, I'm not trying to criticize anybody, but you're looking at a job where you have absolutely no skills. And that's why you're working at at the minimum wage, because you don't have skills to acquire a higher paying job. So I would say to these people, look, if your job is being replaced by a machine, it's not something where you need a whole lot of thinking to do the job. So rather, you have to learn some skills, something machines can't do. You have to learn those skills that will make you more valuable to the employer, more valuable to the economy, and you'll be able to earn higher wages because you're contributing more, not earning higher wages because the government passes a law and so everybody has to pay more wages, higher wages.
Professor Michael Bustler, Stockton University. And the new report finds Americans are starting their own businesses at a record rate this year. The U.S. Census Bureau says 2.5 million new business applications were filed for this year alone. That's already more than half the businesses formed in all of 2020. Last year's 4.4 million new businesses was the biggest increase in record. And according to the Peterson Institute for International Economics, some of the new business owners lost their jobs during the pandemic. And lawmakers are working on a bipartisan bill to address cyber attacks. Calls for various public and private entities to notify the government within 24 hours of an attack. Right now, there is no single federal standard for breach notifications. Critics say this is leaving the U.S. vulnerable to hackers. The bill is expected to apply to U.S. government agencies and federal contractors. It also includes liability protections for those who submit reports. And the U.S. is removing its 25% tariff on Scotch whiskey, cheaper whiskey. But British tariffs on American whiskey are still in place. Indeed, Patrick Hayden has the story.
The US has removed trade tariffs on Scotch whisky and most other spirits, but tariffs still remain on American whiskies going to the UK. That relates to a separate dispute over steel and aluminum. The US whisky industry was experiencing double-digit growth on its exports for years before the tariffs.
And those have been in place since June of 2018, and that has had a tremendous impact on our exports to both the UK and the EU. We've seen a decline in our exports to the UK of 53%.
Locasio says that's a loss of nearly $80 million of exports to the UK over 2 years in a handful of categories.
And when I talk about American whiskeys, we're talking about bourbons, Tennessee whiskey, American single malt whiskey, which is a growing category, and American rye whiskey.
Locasio says hopefully the Scotch whisky tariffs will signal an end to tariffs on US spirits. The US tariffs on Scotch whisky were part of a 17-year trade tussle with the EU. That's over US plane maker Boeing and European rival Airbus. Former President Trump escalated tensions in 2019, slapping a 25% tariff on Scotch whisky. Those were suspended earlier this year. Now the US and Britain have agreed to drop those tariffs for at least 5 years. The Scotch Whisky Association says the last 2 years have been extremely damaging. It says the tariffs caused losses of more than $840 million in exports. Britain's Trade Secretary Liz Truss says it takes US trade relations to the next level. She said they can focus on other things together, including working more closely to challenge unfair practices by nations like China. The Scotch tariffs will be removed next month. Patrick Hayden, NTD News.
And Lebanese banks are struggling to keep afloat. The economic crisis is crippling the country and its banking sector. NTD's Patrick Hayden has the details.
Lebanon's banking sector is shrinking as economic crisis affects the whole country.
The crisis in Lebanon is essentially, first of all, a banking collapse, which is the biggest in all modern history. The banking collapse and associated economic collapse.
About 3,000 bankers, more than 10% of the industry's workforce, have either resigned or lost their jobs. Lending has plummeted by 25%. In 2020, the Lebanese government defaulted on its debt repayments. Government de facto capital controls were then used to prevent the Lebanese population from accessing their bank deposits. Currency is obtained on a black market. A government report from last year says the crisis has generated losses of $83 billion in the finance industry, but the economic output of the country is only about $55 billion. Prior to the crisis, Lebanon was known as the Switzerland of the Middle East. Then the industry brought in 9% of GDP. Now the industry is just managing to stay afloat by reducing the levels of debt to generate much needed liquidity. Patrick Hayden, NTD News.
That's still to come this evening. A new report predicts we could see record spending this Father's Day. So how much do you think people are planning to spend? And a flying electric taxi makes a splashy debut. The new aircraft could ring in a new age of urban air mobility. More on that after this short break.
Hello, I'm Mike Lindell, inventor of MyPillow. Thanks to your support, you've helped make MyPillow become one of the fastest growing companies in America. Over the last 12 years, you've helped MyPillow create thousands of jobs right here in the USA.
When I got MyPillow, I'm asleep almost immediately. I stay asleep at night and I wake up more well-rested in the morning.
That's why I invented MyPillow. My patented fill adjusts to your exact individual needs and helps keep your neck supported and aligned. I'm interrupting this commercial right now. Retailers have canceled MyPillow, and to thank you for your support, I'm going to pass the savings directly on to you. Go to MyPillow.com right now to get deep discounts on all MyPillow products. For example, you can get my premium MyPillows regularly $69.98, now just $29.98, the lowest price ever.
For the best night's sleep in the whole wide world, visit MyPillow.com.
Why are millions of Americans moving their money into gold and silver? It's simple. The world has never been more unpredictable. The biggest economic crisis we've faced since 2008, and a government that's about to print trillions and trillions of dollars. That's why so many Americans are turning to gold and silver to protect their nest egg. American Hartford Gold is a trusted name to help families to safeguard their wealth. With an A+ rating from the BBB and 5-star ratings on the biggest review websites like Trustpilot and Google, American Hartford Gold can help you convert any qualifying IRA or 401k into precious metals. Or they'll help you to easily purchase physical gold and silver and deliver straight to your doorstep. Learn how you can protect your wealth with gold and silver today. Get this free 2021 information guide. Call 866-893-1493 or text TV to 65532.
Welcome back. Father's Day is this Sunday, and a new report indicates it could be a record in terms of how much people spend on gifts and other items for Dad. The National Retail Federation is predicting that consumers will shell out upwards of $20 billion. That'd be the most Father's Day spending on record, and a lot more than last year's $17 billion. The National Retail Federation also says those surveyed are planning to spend an average of $174 in Father's Day items. And an aerospace company in California is unveiling its first full-scale electric flying taxi. Its debut is adding more appeal to the urban air traffic market. And Colin Fredrickson gives us a peek.
Using XR technology to simulate a ride in a hangar, California-based aerospace company Archer Aviation is displaying its first electric flying taxi, the Maker.
Archer is building electric vertical takeoff and landing aircraft that will be used in and around urban environments. So these vehicles take off and land like a helicopter, but then they also fly forward on a wing. And they're all powered by these electric motors.
According to the company's co-founders, the flying taxis take off and land on parking structures known as vertiports without causing any congestion. Charging on the ground takes less than 10 minutes, while flight speeds can reach 150 miles per hour.
And so the typical mission that we'd be flying would be around 30 miles. That's our nominal mission. So if you can imagine a trip like JFK Airport to Manhattan, that's about a 17-mile trip, and that trip can take anywhere from 60 to 90 minutes in a car. But that's a trip that we can do in around 5 to 7 minutes in a plane.
The flying taxis are all electric with no fuel consumption and have low maintenance costs. That makes them affordable to the masses.
So our entry-level price is between $3 to $4 per passenger mile. So we're looking at $50 to $70 trips, kind of in and around cities.
Experts estimate the electric vertical takeoff and landing market to be worth billions over the next decade. But it still takes time to obtain regulatory approval. Currently, Archer is certifying its piloted 4-passenger aircraft with the Federal Aviation Administration. The company expects to launch Makers for commercial use in 2024 in Los Angeles and Miami. Even before Maker's grand debut, interest in zero-emission aircraft and battery-powered vehicles was already growing.
Batteries are within exactly the amount of power you need in order to fly economically viable missions. And electric motors are now power dense enough where we can still do the same thing. And so we're at this incredible juncture here. We're going to see these vehicles flying in and around our cities, and we can do it in a really safe, cost-effective, and sustainable way.
But the company is now embroiled in a legal battle with Boeing-backed rival Wisk Aero over patent infringement.
As the latest business updates for today, you can still catch NTD Evening News with Stephanie Cox. That's at 6:30 p.m. Eastern. For NTD Business, that's all for today. Thank you for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.
We have a new channel. Subscribe to us on YouTube at NTD News. Get the highlights of our news broadcast and the most important headlines that we curate especially for you.
Don't let YouTube decide what information you get. That's your choice. YouTube is deleting our videos and cuts you off from a source of honest reporting. Make sure you don't lose access to NTD's news content, and take a quick moment to subscribe to our newsletter so no matter what happens here, you'll keep your access to a trustworthy news source.